I wanted to go through and share a little bit about IBMSC with those that are here. Some of you are very familiar with what we do, and some of you might not be as familiar just because we are a new department, and we're pretty young, I would say, in terms of government agencies and government groups. During the height of the pandemic, and that was mentioned earlier by Don, the nation encountered multiple challenges with material supply chains, and those problems affected production and delivery of PPE, testing and diagnostics, and of course, vaccines and therapeutics as well. As consumers, supply chain became a household word. A lot of people didn't even know what it was before COVID. Now everybody knows what it is. Even my parents, who are in their 80s, they know what supply chain means now. And we all experienced it as well. Supply chain occurred and impacted our grocery stores. So from, I'll say, infant formula to hand sanitizer, and even, crazy enough, toilet paper that was being rationed. So supply chain is a big issue, and anyone who's in planning or a supply chain expert knows you have one item that is a weak link in your supply chain, and it can shut down all of manufacturing of that product. So it's extremely important, and we're happy to see that the government, especially HHS, is looking into supply chains now and expanding that effort to ensure that we're much more resilient. So the pandemic revealed, of course, the need for government intervention. Critical public health investments were needed at a scale never seen before in the government, especially for healthcare products. And that is why industrial-based management and supply chain was created, to help address some of these issues that nobody was really looking at before. Okay, sorry, this is an eye chart, but I wanted to show everyone where we fit into the ASPR organization. As Ms. O'Connell mentioned earlier, we are the new kid on the block, our newest office within ASPR. We just became official in the organization about a year ago in February of 2023. And happy to say, as she mentioned, we became truly real with a new budget line in the 2024 budget that was passed by Congress a couple weeks ago. And actually, just very recently, it was brought to my attention, Congressman Dunn of Florida even gave us a shout out in the congressional hearing with Secretary Becerra on last Wednesday. So happy to hear that we're getting our name out and people are starting to learn who we are. For those of you not familiar, again, on this eye chart, you can see we are one of 7 of the ASPR offices, and you might have heard that Ms. O'Connell mentioned centers. We are going through some name changing, so we will be called centers when that becomes official in the Federal Register. But we work along with our wonderful sister offices of administration, preparedness, response, BARDA, SNS, and HCOR. So happy to be in such good company within ASPR. So our vision for IBMSC and our strategic objectives. So our vision is pretty straightforward. I'm not going to read through everything on here. We are here to enhance preparedness for today's and future public health emergencies. We are here not to just build, but we also want to preserve and sustain a robust supply chain. And we do this through collaborative and enduring partnerships. We invest in our industrial base, especially for products or services that would be needed during a pandemic or a public health emergency or a localized disaster. So this summit is a great example of how the government and industry can come together to achieve this nationwide mission, and in the end, we will save lives. The 3 strategic objectives listed there, pretty self-explanatory also. We want to ensure a resilient supply chain. So we are promoting a resilient capability from a domestic perspective of critical medical products, technologies, and services, again, to support public health emergencies and disasters. We also want to foster sustainable investment portfolios. And this is super important for us as we have invested $17 billion, as Ms. O'Connell mentioned. We want to make sure that these capabilities, these services, these capacities are here for the long term. We are desperately trying to prevent companies from shutting down because demand has decreased from the height of the pandemic, and trying to work with them to get commercial business become sustainable and compete with the global market as well. We know it's very volatile. There's a lot of competition from global suppliers. So working with those companies. And then the last one, strategic objective 3, is cultivating enduring partnerships. And this is why we invited all of you here today. Again, as Waylon mentioned, we want to have the conversation. We want to have the open dialogue, the transparency on what your needs are, what you think the directions we should be going. And we want to speak to you also about some of our limitations, what our funding situations are, and where we think that we can prioritize the funding that we do have going in the future. I'm sorry, just want to go back. I also wanted to share the diagram on the right. This is a great visual. It really shows that we are all hands on deck. There's a lot of different inputs in us being successful, a lot of areas that we touch and that we also receive information and we receive feedback from, and that a lot of that points to you. So there's the industrial base. There is the constraints we have with budget and policy. There are our R&D thinkers and innovators. We have the IT tools that we are using to collect data and provide information and make informed decisions. And of course, our staff is hugely important. With $17 billion worth of investments, we need to have the right people and have the right staff to help manage all these investments and do our due diligence for the taxpayer. Okay. The bottom of that slide, actually, I skipped through, was we really, our alignment with the ASPR strategic plan is also critically important. And then again, our growth and sustainability also. So those are two of some of the guiding principles or enabling principles that we're following. We have 4 more here, and you'll see investments, again, predominantly will be domestic manufacturing. We're looking at onshoring, building that capacity here in the United States. Nearshoring is also an option. But definitely becoming more self-reliant and increasing our resilience from a supply chain perspective. The second on the bottom left there is data-driven decisions. So we want to have good information. We want to obtain as much current market research and have advanced supply chain tools available so that we're on top of what's happening in the world and it's impacting the industrial base every day. That information also we want to use to inform any future decisions. So we, again, limited COVID dollars still remain. We are spending those, the last that we have on investments, looking for the future for additional funding. And we need to make sure that we're making the right decisions, we're making the right investments in the right companies. Shared success. I think this one is really, again, self-explanatory. Our relationships with companies, both large and small, with trade organizations, with industry experts and academic institutions, are critically important. These are really non-starters for us. Without these collaborations, IBMSC can't meet our mission. Consequently, we are in it from the start and very committed, as Ms. O'Connell mentioned. And then the last is the collaborations. Again, IBMSC can't do it alone. We do rely and we work very closely with their interagencies, our partners within ASPR, the other centers, as well as within HHS, other optives such as CDC, NIH, and FDA, and then also working with the White House or Commerce or the State Department. All of them have inputs that support supply chain, and we're working very closely so that we're aligned and we're working together with them. Okay, so who are we? What's within IBMSC? And I couldn't be any more proud of the team that we have built and we are continuing to build upon. So we have 5 offices, or you often hear us call them domains, under IBMSC, each with a specialized focus and partnership with industry. Each domain has a unique mission, from collaborating with industry on innovative technologies for public health, to conducting in-depth market and economic analysis, and to understanding how we can optimize public health medicine and equipment supply chains. So here we are with the 5 domains in the blue boxes. DPA is the first in the upper left. You'll be hearing actually a lot more detail about that from Paige Ezernick, who is our director for that office. So she'll be actually speaking right after me. So I'm not going to talk at all about DPA. She's going to share that information. Testing and diagnostics. They work with the COVID test manufacturers to ensure there were 1 billion tests available for the American public as the president promised. This testing and diagnostic group did this through 6 rounds of covidtest.gov, where every American household could order tests and have them delivered to their doorstep or their mailbox through a collaboration we had with the U.S. Postal Service. Hopefully all of you took advantage of that and had tests delivered to your home more than once. So again, we did 6 rounds of that. This team also continues to support and collaborate with GSA to deliver tests on a weekly basis to 30,000 different locations for our underserved and underinsured populations. So this is with communities through food banks, community health centers, long-term care facilities, and many other distribution channels. Matt Humbard leads this group. He's the director for our testing and diagnostics group. Enabling Innovations, which is there at the bottom, that is a newer name that we transitioned, and we're transitioning to from our Advanced Manufacturing Technologies group. This is the group that supports the work that Dean does, and Joe Hamill is our director for that domain. This group also focuses on KSMs and APIs, as was mentioned previously, for essential medicines, a critically important effort that we are working on, and we see that as one of the areas in our priorities for the future. They also work with the solutions such as the blow-fill seal, the saline in the box technology that Dean mentioned, electrical vehicle and takeoff and landing airplane that could be used in a disaster to either move first responders or medical equipment, or potentially working on the ability to actually transport an infectious patient as well. So again, Joe leads this group, a lot of different novel technologies. I'm very proud of the work that they've done. Our critical medical equipment group, so the bottom right there, blue box, is also going through a name change. It was formerly just referred to as PPE, or personal protective equipment. And as Don mentioned, a huge area that came to light during the COVID response with masks, gloves, N95s, and also all the components that go into making those materials. This group is still working on those investments, managing those. There are a few more that we expect to happen also in the near future. And they also support the Make PPE in America Act, which requires that all the components for any of those PPEs purchased by the government are manufactured domestically in the U.S. So working to support that group, also Make PPE in America within the White House. And then supply chain optimization. This group is a more strategic group. They're becoming our landscape experts in the supply chain for our core commodities. They'll be conducting market research studies. For example, PPE would be the first one, and they're looking at the as-is situation. Who are the manufacturers, both domestic and global? What are their capacities? Where do they get their raw materials from? Are they sole sourced? All those types of supply chain issues that, again, if one thing is out of whack, is not available, could completely shut down that production. They will also lead, all this information that they're gathering also will help us to inform future decisions, as I've mentioned. The other area that the supply chain optimization group is looking into surveillance. So they're looking at where other factors can impact the supply chain for public health, the public health industrial base. For example, if there was last year a potential strike for a transportation company, how is that going to impact the cold chain that uses that company so critically and urgently? If there's a hurricane or a tornado that impacts a facility, manufacturing facility in North Carolina, what is the impact on the materials that are produced through there? If there's a war going on in the Middle East, how does that impact the supply chains specific to public health and medical products? So that's what our supply chain optimization group is doing, and that capability is growing and growing every day. Okay, so this is kind of some numbers. Don mentioned $17 billion in investments, and that's really since COVID, because that's when we got our supplemental dollars. You'll see PPE has invested over $1.7 billion in over 21 contracts. 10 of those are still active. And again, there's expected to have 2 other efforts going through our Biomap consortium with our partners in BARDA, and we'll have a talk about Biomap also a little bit later. And then Advanced Manufacturing domain, again, has invested $940 million in 12 contracts supporting 12 of the APIs in various stages of development and onshoring. Again, that's an area we want to see grow in the future, as we see that needs to be a lot of effort to try to get the Army list that Dean mentioned. They did an essential medicines list in May of 2022. We're working on knocking down that list and onshoring and developing as many of those APIs and essential medicines as possible. Testing and diagnostics has done also a great job. $2.3 billion in capacity expansions. Again, that's working with the actual test manufacturers, as well as the components for pipette tips and sample tubes, and nitrocellulose fibers. So they've worked very closely with them for expansion, but also the $10 billion in procurement for the actual COVID tests. Again, so we have a stockpile. Those got distributed through covidtest.gov, and then also the weekly distribution that goes on and is ongoing as well. Some numbers that I don't have on there for testing and diagnostics. The capacity increased 13.8 million tests per month. Actually, 1.789 billion tests have been procured through their contracts. 860 million tests have been distributed through the Postal Service, and 758 million have been distributed to the long-term care facilities, nursing homes, and assisted living centers. In total, actually, this testing and diagnostics group has had over 85 contracts that they've been managing over the last 3 years as well. So as you can see, a huge amount of effort has gone into these domains over the last few years. And then the last bullet up there, vaccines and manufacturing materials, 3.3 billion. I will say those have been executed by our sister organization, BARDA, and thank you to them. And actually, that's where I came from before I started here a little over a year and a half ago. But they have focused on the expansion efforts specific to the mRNA vaccines, the therapeutics, and the components that went into them as well. So again, huge amounts of money have been spent on expansions. So the future of IBMSC. So we are getting beyond COVID, right? And we see that there's more to be done in terms of the medical health supply chain. These are our 3 biggest priorities. I'm not going to say they're our only priorities, but these are the ones that we are focusing on as the ones we need to concentrate first, but we are also very flexible and agile, and will take on other priorities and responsibilities as they occur, especially as they become incidental disruptions to supply chain. The first one is sustainability. Again, I've mentioned this multiple times. We would like our investments to be enduring. We want them to last for the next 5 to 10 years, if not longer, and be here when that next pandemic happens or there's another public health emergency. We don't want something to happen where people come back and say, what happened to the expansions and all the investments we did like 3 or 4 years ago. So sustainability is a huge effort for us. We're doing capacity preservation efforts, and then also we're working whole of government, so looking at the other levers such as legislation, regulatory, tariffs, other things that could help provide incentives for boosting the commercial market for our domestic manufacturers. Onshoring, number 2, resilience of critical drugs through KSMs and APIs. Again, we've mentioned this multiple times. We want to onshore ASMs and KPIs. Again, our intent is to gain self-sufficiency, get that back so when borders close in countries of global suppliers, the American people are not caught short and without the needed medicines to maintain our national health. And the third is general surveillance, and that's where I mentioned really the supply chain optimization group. We're building resilience in domestic manufacturing. We also need to be somewhat of a public health industry guardian or a watchdog per se. We want to be looking out and have awareness of the different sector landscapes, the vulnerabilities, the high risk areas. Supply chain experts and material planners, again, know if we're missing one piece, it can completely shut down an industry or a sector, or if they're sole sourced and there's only one supplier, that can be an issue and a risk also. A good example of what we have found actually most recently through our surveillance is a relatively new program that we are going to be focusing on. It has potential to make us very vulnerable. It can be considered a lower tier supply chain concern, but it affects really a wide area of the medical, pharmaceutical, and healthcare industry and its sterilization capacity. So that's an area we are looking at now to build. It's kind of something that's kind of under the radar, but impacts so many different parts of the industry that we are really looking into what are the alternatives to traditional sterilization and how can we actually increase the capacity to ensure that that does not become a bottleneck, as we did see during COVID, that slowed things down and slowed production, getting production and products out to the American people. So I am almost done. The last slide I wanted to share, actually not the last, but the last program is our IBX Connect program. Waylon mentioned it. I think there's a QR code on the back of the booklet. This is an area where companies can share their ideas, their technologies. They get a direct line and opportunity to engage with IBMSC and a whole host of other U.S. government experts within multiple government agencies. So we typically will have on our IBX Connect meetings IBMSC, BARDA, CDC, NIH, FDA. We will also have DoD, we'll have Commerce, we'll have State, we'll have a whole host, again, of other agencies represented, a lot of their subject matter experts. We share what we think your solution, your technology, where it could fit into our mission or one of the other agencies. We also share information on strategy and how we could see the direction you might want to take your product. And then also what other funding opportunities are out there. So one of the things we always want to make sure people are aware, we can't promise you a funding opportunity at these IBX Connect meetings, but we can let you know what is coming up or what is already on the street that you can apply to. And then also if there isn't anything, or if this is a technology that we might not need right now, we don't have a requirement, but we want to know that you're out there. We want to know that you have this technology because we might not need you now. We might not need you next year, but we might need you in 3 years or 5 years or 7 years. So it's very important for us to know that you're there and that we have met you at some point and we can call upon you, and we have already started a relationship at least to get things moving when another pandemic or public health emergency occurs.